Hello, everybody. It's Milton Davis here. It's Thursday night. Yesterday, I did a short video talking about the Ki Khanga RPG game and how we developed it and how it came to be. And I also talked about the anthology that accompanied it, the Ki Khanga Anthology. It's a collection of short stories written by yours truly and Balogun Ojetade, where we use these stories as prompts for people to develop adventures in Ki Khanga. So I decided to come back tonight and read a story. But before I read this story, I wanted to take a moment to give a dedication for this reading. One of the things about being on social media is that you get a chance to interact with people that you've never met before face to face. And some of these people end up becoming friends, lifelong friends. And in this particular case, the person that I'm talking about is Barry Jones. I met Barry through my son, Brandon. They worked together at H.H. Gregg. And during their interactions, Barry found out that I was an author. And he picked up my Changa Safari book. He read it, really enjoyed it, and started to read all of my stuff. And of course, because on Facebook, on social media, I met Barry through social media, and we talked constantly. He probably read almost all of my books. We would get into discussions about it, and he attended all of my live readings here on Facebook. And Barry was a very courteous, very polite person. He would apologize if I was giving a reading and he wasn't able to make it. And he always seemed to enjoy the stories, and we always talked about them afterwards. Unfortunately, about 2 weeks ago, Barry passed away from COVID. Of course, it was something that caught me by surprise and his family as well. And so I decided that when I did my reading tonight that I would dedicate this reading to Barry and his family. And I chose a story that I know he had read before and one that he enjoyed. The name of this story is called Old Hunter. So I'll read it to you. He knew long before the drums warned him. The nauseous pain in his belly was his sign that it had been since his initiation rites. Each Namaqua had his or her special tale, their own physical alarm warning them of a breach. As Old Hunter, his was the most sensitive. He rose from his cot in darkness, the sun yet to climb the misty eastern horizon. As he stood, the drums sounded, their rapid cadence vibrating against the bottom of his bare feet. The lodge came alive with the sound of urgent voices, rattling wood and shrill whistles as each warrior dressed, armed themselves, and called their mounts. There was a breach of the cleave, and the Namaqua would seal it. He strapped on his armor, then retrieved his axe from his plain wooden case. As he lifted the long-handled weapon to his shoulder, the door to his room opened. His daughters entered. "Are you ready, Baba?" Nubunya asked. She smiled nervously, displaying the dimples for which she was named. Her bow rested across her back, a quiver of arrows strapped tight to her leg. She worried about him too much, especially when they were summoned. The years had been kind to him, and the spirits of those gone before surrounded him, but he could not deny time. Every fight could be his last, but it was the same for the younger hunters as well. "Of course he is," Sitalala answered for him. She stared at her sister as if her question was uncalled for. His oldest daughter leaned on her lance, scolding his younger sister with her eyes. He kept his head low so they could not see him grin. Sitalala admired him. She thought he would live forever. He wished she was right. Old Hunter walked past his daughters into the large living area. The room was sparse. A central fireplace occupied the room with a low table and 3 low stools. The only other piece of furniture in the small room was a low altar holding an incense holder. 5 weapons hung on the wall behind the incense holder. 2 swords, a bow, a long spear, and an axe similar to his own. Old Hunter's daughters knelt before the altar as he inserted 5 incense sticks into the holder and lit each one with a candle. He joined his daughters before the altar, then the three lowered their foreheads to the wooden floor. We pay our respects to those who have gone before us, those that now rest in the Creator's bosom. Join us as we ride to protect those blind to that which threatens them. Guide our blows as we strike. Give us your blessing and your strength. They stood in unison. Old Hunter hugged each of his daughters, then led them outside. The others gathered before the house, armed and ready. They bowed. Old Hunter and his daughters nodded in unison. He walked among them, inspecting each of their weapons. There could be no weakness among them, for the creatures from the cleave gave no quarter. Madness knew nothing of surrender. Evil claimed no respite. Each warrior lowered his or her head in respect as Old Hunter came before them, handling weapons that had many owners before the ones that now held them, weapons that owed their strength not only to the metal and wood that made them, but to the spirits of each wielder within them. Sitalala touched his shoulder. They are coming. The Dumas appeared quickly over the horizon, covering the distance in moments. The lean felines separated quickly, each going instinctively to its rider, then lying calmly like an obedient pet. They were far from it. The Dumas shared a bond with the Namaqua, a bond that hinged on the death of the creatures of the cleave. When the Namaqua gave homage that another beast was vanquished, the Duma fed. The largest Duma strode to Old Hunter. It brushed against him before sitting and allowing itself to be saddled. Old Hunter strapped the saddle in place as he had done hundreds of times, wondering as he always did if this would be his last hunt. He wondered who would inherit his axe, a weapon passed on to him at the death of his father, who received it from his father. The thoughts did not linger long. Focus was required to deal with any minion from beyond the great peaks forming the border of the cleave. The Dumas ran to that border, undeterred by their human riders. There was no beast faster than a Duma. Not even the creatures of the cleave could match them in speed. Old Hunter lay flat against his Duma's back, gripping the leather strap encircling the cat's neck. There was no need to guide it. The Dumas had the scent before they reached the Namaqua. Old Hunter searched the rapidly approaching horizon to see what type of creature the cleave had unleashed. When he finally saw it, his eyes went wide. He hit the Duma hard on its side, the signal for it to stop. It howled in protest but slowed until it trotted. Old Hunter struck it again and it stopped, turning its head quickly to snap at his hand. The others guided their reluctant Dumas to him. Old Hunter sat up, his eyes still locked in the distance. Can you see it? The others nodded. Sitalala dismounted and came to him. It's very tall. Old Hunter nodded. Nabunya, take the archers and form a perimeter. You will fire on it until the others can move in closer. Nabunya nodded. Yes, Baba. She rode off to rally the other archers around her. You will stay behind? Sitalala's words were more statement than question. No, Old Hunter answered. The final blow must be struck. Sitalala raised her thick lance. I'll do it. Old Hunter looked at the lance with sadness. Mumbeja, his wife, once wielded it with a skill unsurpassed. When she died, it was passed to Sitalala, but not without some difficulty. Sitalala was not ready for such a powerful weapon when it was first given to her, and the spirits possessing it rejected her. It was passed on to her cousin, Harina, who wielded it proudly until only a few seasons ago. When it was presented to Sitalala the second time, the spirits did not protest. She had proven her worth with it many times since. It is my duty, he said. You will ride beside me. Sitalala nodded. They rode toward the beast. It stood at least 100 spears, its skin black and slick like a beetle's carapace. Large spikes protruded backwards from the sides of its thick neck that then ran along the crest of the back before trailing down its spine to its thrashing tail. Its proportions were man-like. It walked on 2 legs, its muscle arms punctuated with large claws. As they neared, it seemed to be running away from them. Old Hunter hoped this was all it would be, a cautious following of a beast that had lost its way. The creature turned toward them, and its hopes disappeared. It roared, brandishing a mouth of dagger-like teeth as it shook its primate-like head from side to side. The archers quickly slowed to take their positions while Old Hunter and the others kept riding closer. Old Hunter concentrated on the beast's movement, watching its gestures and stance. A realization took hold, and he brought his signal flute to his lips. 3 sharp whistles brought the Dumas to a halt. There was nothing aggressive about the beast. It seemed to be defending itself, turning toward them only to keep from being attacked from behind. He surmised that if they kept their distance and advanced slowly, this beast would find its own way back over the mountains and back into the cleave. Sitalala apparently didn't agree with him. She rode on alone, her Duma quickly closing the gap. Her rash action forced his hand. He blew 2 sharp chirps, and the archers loaded and fired. The arrows reached the beast before his daughter, most bouncing off his tough hide, while a few barely lodged into it. Old Hunter kicked his Duma, but the beast refused to move. He leaned closer to his ear. I know this is foolish, old one, but I cannot let my daughter die. Either you will take me, or I will go alone. The Duma growled and sprang forward. Old Hunter stayed close to his body, watching as Sitalala drew closer to the beast, and the beast staggered back, swatting away the arrows like swarming summer flies. Then it saw Sitalala and her Duma. It swung its claws at them, and the Duma dodged, Sitalala ducking as the hand passed over her. Then it swung that same hand back, knocking Sitalala and the Duma into the air. They landed apart, both sprawling in the low grass and neither moving. Old Hunter sat up on the Duma and snatched the axe from his back. Spirits guide me, he whispered. He heaved the long-handled weapon with both hands. It spun end over end, the blade finally biting into the beast's shoulder. Take me, spirits, he yelled. He held out his hands, and the spirits of his fathers answered. Old Hunter rose from the Duma and streaked to his axe. His hands wrapped around the handle as his feet touched the creature's shoulder. He yanked his axe free, just as the beast began to turn his head. Old Hunter spun the axe to its flat side and struck the beast's jaw hard before leaping free. He rolled and came up to his feet, holding his axe before him and thanking the spirits for their strength. The beast stumbled away, grasping at its jaw. Then it turned and ran. Old Hunter ran to Sitalala. She was up on her hands and knees, shaking her head. Her Duma limped to her. Its left hind leg lifted from the ground as it walked. Old Hunter knelt beside his daughter. It was a foolish thing you did, he scolded. Yes, Baba, a foolish thing, she answered. She extended her hand toward her lance, and it slid across the grass to her. Your spirits still favor you despite that, Old Hunter said. Stay here and tend your Duma. We must drive this beast back home. It seems it no more wants to be here than we want it to be. The others seemed to finally see what Old Hunter had sensed. They rode after the fleeing beast, driving it into the mountains with shouts and waving weapons. Suddenly the beast crouched and leaped, soaring over the grasslands as if in flight and landing at the base of the gray peaks. It scrambled up the sheer granite slopes, emitting a series of sharp, urgent barks. It was answered by a bellow that shook Old Hunter's innards. Boulders tumbled from the clouds like grain, some striking the beast so hard it lost its grip. But before it could fall, a massive hand emerged from above, a claw appendage similar to the beast, but many times larger. It caught the beast, which wrapped its arms around that of a much larger creature. The arm lifted, taking the beast into the clouds. A huge face appeared. It opened its maw and bellowed again with a force that made the rider scramble back. Old Hunter stood, his sweating hands working at his axe hilt. Sitalala stood beside him. What do we do, Baba? She asked. Old Hunter gave her a grim smile. We pray that our deaths will be swift. The face hung over them for what seemed like an eternity, then it slowly withdrew into the mist. It bellowed one last time, its departure marked by ground-shaking steps and more boulders tumbling down from the mountainside. The Dumas and the Namaquah gathered around Old Hunter, and his daughters and his daughters' faces displayed their dread. Etta has spared us to this day, he said. Let's hope she remains generous. The others nodded, and their fears seemed to dissipate. Old Hunter mounted his Duma, then lifted Sitalala on as well. The old Duma walked slowly, staying beside his wounded companion. Old Hunter glanced over his shoulder to the mountains. Never had he seen such a large beast. Will it come again? Sitalala asked. We will pray that it doesn't, he replied. He smiled at his daughter. It seems you still have much to learn. Sitalala dropped her head. It seems I do, Baba. Labunya and her Duma joined them. The ancestors were expecting us, she joked. They will have our company soon enough, Old Hunter replied. But not today. Sitalala climbed onto her sister's Duma, and they rode back to the village. Old Hunter looked back over his shoulder again to the gray clouds obscuring the mountain peaks. One day they would not be strong enough, but for now, they were enough. And that was Old Hunter from the Ki Khanga Anthology. If you want to read more stories, it's available now. You can go to the MV Media site and pick it up. It's also available from Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, or wherever books are sold. I hope you guys enjoyed the story, and I hope you're enjoying our celebration of Sword and Soul Month. And I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye.